3 meters. That's 180. 3 meters. Right, welcome back to another video. It's the middle of February. It's been about a fortnight since we've had a video out in the veg plot because last weekend it was our daughter's 18th, so we spent the whole weekend celebrating that with her, which was great, but now it's back to reality. A lot of you might know we both work full time, so we've really only got the weekend to get stuff done on the smallholding. So we spend our time during the week and on a night planning what we're going to do and try and cram as much as we can into the weekend. So while we've been not off, but off the last couple of weeks, we've been planning and ordering some stuff to get as much as we can done this weekend. Unfortunately, the weather gods aren't playing ball and it's miserable and it's wet, but I've got some work to do in the garage, which I'll take you and show you in a minute. But we've been out an hour this morning, we've been walking around planning what we're going to do, and we're going to give you a run through now what our plans are. Last time we were out here, the last video we took this whole hedge out that was going down the side here and it was encroaching in on these 3 beds. So the original plan was just to replace these 3 beds with new wood and double height, like for like. Well, that plan's been torn up, thrown in the bin, and we've come up with a new plan. So I'm going to run you through it now. We built these 3 beds last year and planted in them, so we've had the experience now of using like longer, thinner beds, and it worked out a lot better because you can reach the middles from the sides. I mean, they're still a bit wide for Tracy, so that'll come into the plan that we're going to do next. But they're miles easier and much more better to work with than these bigger beds. But these 2 will be ideal for growing squash and stuff like that, where they need a lot of room to spread. But ideally, we're going to go with longer, thinner beds, which takes us onto phase 1 of our next plan. So phase 1 of our plan is we're going to replace these 3 wide beds with 4 longer, shorter beds. So we're going to replace them with 4-foot beds, which is, I've just put this here as a guide because we've got a load of these flexible bars as well, which we put net over, and they'll fit perfect in a 4-foot bed. So that's like a 120 centimetre 4-foot bed, and they're going to be 4.8 meters long by 1.2 meters wide. So we'll just show you what that looks like, and then we'll move on to phase 2. Right, so this just gives me a excuse to use Tracy's new board. So what we're starting with is 3 beds that are 4 meters long by 2 meters wide. So that ends up being 24 square meters of growing space. So what we're going to do, we're going to finish with 4 beds by 4.8 meters long by 1.2 meters wide, which is 23 square meters of growing space. So we're actually going to lose a meter squared of growing space when we replace these beds. But now we're going to move on to phase 2, and we're going to show you where we're going to claw it back. Right, so this is going to be phase 2 of the plan. So these beds here that we've got, they're all rotten and they're all falling to bits, so they need replacing ideally anyway, and they're only like 6 inches high. We're going to make them a foot high by doubling the wood up, so we're going to make them double the height, which is a lot more space for the roots to grow, space to get nutrients into the bed. Also, if you notice, these gaps are really narrow, so you can't really get down with a wheelbarrow and stuff like that, but we're going to solve all our problems. So we're going to rip all these out. So we're going to replace these 3 6 meter by 1 meter beds with 3 4.8 meters by 1.2 meter beds, the same as them ones over there. So they're 16 foot by 4 foot. I'm losing myself, but try and keep up. So we're going to replace these 3 and make bigger paths, which are going to bring them probably up to about this pot here when we put the bigger paths in. But obviously then we're going to lose space at the back. So when we sachet over here, we're going to, them 4.8 meter beds will end about there, and then we're going to leave another gap, and we're going to put another meter bed by 4.8 meter bed running this way, which will house the rhubarb, because we're going to have to change that rhubarb from over there when we do them beds, and we're going to put it in the middle of this bed. So this bed will house these 3 nice big rhubarb plants. So we'll go and do some calculations and we'll see what we're losing or gaining on this bed. Right, so on to phase 2, where we've just come from. We're starting with 3 beds at 6.2 metres by 1.1, which is 20.5 metres squared of growing space. And we're going to finish with 3 4.8 by 1.2s and 1 4.8 by a metre, just so we can get a nice big path in as well which added up comes to 22 meters squared. So we're gaining 1.2 meters squared there. What we don't want to do is lose 1.6 meters squared there. What we don't want to do is lose any growing space. So up to now we're winning. I don't know if you noticed, but you've got a lack of Tracy talking on this video because we've both been ill. I'm just getting better and she's just starting down with it. So you're just going to have to put up with me mostly on this video, I'm afraid. Right, back outside onto phase 3. So this is phase 3 of the whole veg plot makeover. Now this bed is absolutely trashed and there's a lot of space, unused space here where Tracy stood. So what we're going to do with this one, we're going to create another 2 beds, like 4 foot wide long beds. But we're going to rip this one out and make one similar size to it there, but 4 foot wide, and then another one about 4 meters. It's going to be a little bit shorter because of the hedge there, and we're going to encroach into this space here which is not being used, and we'll leave a nice big path in the middle so we can get up and down with a wheelbarrow and stuff. So this is going to be the last bit of the veg plot makeover that we're totally renewing, but we've also got a few other things which, if you just come down this way, the likes of this, as we also want to make it aesthetically pleasing to look at, we're going to leave these 2 beds here single height. All the rest we're going to make double height, but these 2 we're just going to leave a single height because this one is the asparagus bed. We're going to titivate it up and obviously tidy it all up and make it all nice and new and neat again, but we're going to put these posts in because as it grows and the ferns grow as it's dying off, they all fall over. So you've got the height here with that, and this is the strawberry bed, so it's got a frame around it anyway which makes it higher. So I'm not going to replace these 2, so we're going to leave these 2 as single height because they already had a bit of texture and they're not going to look lost when we raise the other ones up. So we'll take you back in the shed and show you what phase 3 looks like. Right, so on to phase 3, where we're starting with 1 bed of 4.7 meters by 1.8, so that's 8.5 square meters. We're going to finish with 2 4 meters by 1.2 meters, which is 9.6. So we're gaining another square meter of space there, which overall we're gaining like 1.7 meters of extra growing space. We're not doing it for the growing space, but what we didn't want to do was lose any growing space. So that's ideal and it works out. So I think we're going to implement that plan. I just don't know where we're going to start. So I better get my finger out and get on with it. Right, so now you know the plan for the outside. This is what I'm going to be getting on with today. So we got all this timber delivered. I don't know if we're going to have enough because our plans have changed slightly since it got delivered. But I'm just going to give you a quick run through how we're going to put it together and what we're going to do with it. So it's going to be exactly the same as the ones outside, the new ones outside that you've seen. These are just 6x2 treated timber. So we're just going to put 2 of them together like that, and then we're going to screw them in all the way down the length with these 200mm screws, and we'll get them right up in there, and these will sit on the bottom of the beds so that the screw holes won't be on the top, so no water will be able to get down from there, from the top, and rot it from the inside. Then after we've done that, we're going to run this damp proof course all the way along the inside, which will sit on the inside of the bed, so when the mud's up against it, it won't be constantly wet up against the timber, which will give it another layer of protection. So we'll hopefully, because of the price of timber, we'll never have to make any more through our life here on the Smallholding. That's the plan. So now I better get my tools together and get on with it.
You may notice that my voice still isn't quite as it should be, and that's why there's a distinct lack of me speaking during this video, because I was struggling to speak. It was painful, and I also sounded extremely strange when I did manage to speak. I've been battling a really dreadful cold, and so speaking just wasn't really an option. So instead, I'm just adding this voiceover and letting the footage tell the story while I fill in the words after the fact. So while Stephen was working outside, working to shape the land for the season ahead, I was in the kitchen tending to a different kind of work, the quiet, steady kind that still fills me with warmth and purpose, but the only kind that I could manage on this cold and miserable day that Stephen was working in. Marmalade making is one of our winter joys, a little way to bring the brightness of the oranges into the darker months that we go through here in the northeast of England. Though we don't grow citrus here, obviously, preserving feels like an instinct, a habit that's woven into the rhythm of the Smallholding, keeping us busy and one hand on the preserving wheel at all times, whilst we wait for the garden to start producing and preserving season to start in earnest. To be fair, I've still got a lot of stuff actually in the freezer that needs preserving, so we'll probably be getting to that as soon as I start feeling a lot better. Now, I had a craving for a nice homemade loaf of bread to go along with this marmalade, so rather than try and make it from scratch, which is not something that I do very often, often. I can't even remember the last time I did do it, to be quite honest. I use the bread maker all the time. It's a super, super helpful tool for the kitchen. I just threw all of the ingredients in and then set that away so that was ready. It takes about 4 hours for just a standard white loaf. I didn't fancy any of the healthier stuff today, standard white all the way. So I just popped that on whilst the marmalade was being brought to a boil on the top of the Aga there. Now, I didn't realise, but Stephen had actually put himself some beef short ribs in the bottom of the Aga, the slow cooker. So I just took those out because I needed this big tub of oranges to go in, or big Dutch oven, should I say, of oranges to go in, so that they could just simmer away as the whole fruit for the rest of the day. I made sure to put his beef back in because he wouldn't be a happy bunny when he was coming in for some nice warm food later on, just to find that I'd taken it out. And the other thing that I decided to make was some 1940s inspired World War II flapjack recipe. I have to be honest, because this was a ration recipe, it only made a tiny amount. I did follow it to the letter. It was one of the Ruth Mott's recipes. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Ruth Mott. Absolutely love her here, but it did only make a really tiny amount, and it went in the Aga there. It said for 20 minutes. After 10 minutes it came out ever so slightly burnt, but Stephen enjoyed them.
Right, so decided to do it in phases, so we're going to do it phase one. So I've got all the wood cut for phase one. That's the 4 beds next to the shed. So we're going to get all them cut, get them all membraned up, and then we'll take them out and see what we can do with them first, rather than try and do too much at once. So we're going to try and get phase one done first, chalk it off the board, and then we'll get on to the next lot. We'll see how long this takes. Well, we're losing light and we're running into a few problems. So I think the best thing we're going to have to do is start again tomorrow, but I think what I'm going to have to do is rip the whole thing out and just start from scratch, like we did in that patch over there when we made that new one. It's just the beds are all over the place, they're up and down, and then you've got a path where I don't want a path, and then I want a bed where I want a path. So I think what I'm going to do tomorrow, I'll just rip these beds out. I mean, I've ripped that one out where Tracy is and put that there. The ground's not level, so I might just start, like I say, start from scratch, rip all these beds out, dig up all the soil, move that rhubarb, and just make it as flat as I can. And then I'll just membrane the whole thing, put the beds in line where I want them, and then we'll just order some more gravel and repath the paths, which will do a good job anyway, because this is all way too weedy in the summer and everything, and we spend too much time faffing on with the weeds. So it'll help out in the long run. It's just going to be a bigger job than I thought. So phase one, not quite ticked off yet.
Phase 0.
Yeah, this is phase 0 at the minute. But we'll get there. It'll take a bit of time, but we'll get there.
Who's counting how many times Stephen and I can say phases, or Stephen on my behalf? Have you got it yet that we're doing it in phases? Anyway, back in the kitchen, I keep popping out to see how he's doing with the camera and getting updates for you guys. He is steaming away, and just waiting till the next clip of him to see what he was actually doing. I can't quite believe it. Anyway, these are the oranges that have been in there for a good couple of, well, I think 3 or 4 hours now, just simmering away in that water. It was just plain water that I put them in with. They are Seville oranges, or a mixture of Seville and they're called Emperor sweet oranges. So next up, I'm taking the seeds out of them, or the pips out of them, and just making sure that I don't discard them, because a lot of juice will still come out of those. Some people do use the seeds because apparently they've got a lot of pectin in, but the recipe that I was following by Pam Corbin said to do this, so I followed the recipe to the letter. I will tell you how it turned out later on in the video, but this is where I got to. She said that you should have about 1.7 litres of water. So once I'd taken the seeds out, I measured how much I had liquid-wise, and there was actually a lot more than what I needed. So I needed to get that poured back into the Dutch oven that was empty, and then just to get it put onto the Aga so that it could boil down and just reduce. I think it was about 2 litres, so I needed to reduce quite a bit. So seeds out, I got the flesh all chopped up, and then started bringing that liquid back to the boil on the agar so that it could reduce down. Just put the lid on while I'm bringing it back to the boil. Now that's all of the oranges all chopped up, and I'm just going to literally get the seeds and just drain any excess liquid out of those, just to make sure that we've got all of the goodness before we're moving on to the next step. But before I move on to the next step, a little bit more time had passed and I wanted to see how Stephen was getting on in the garden. Now, I know he told us what his plans were, but I clearly hadn't taken it in because I was shocked when I came out and saw what he was up to.
Right, early start this morning. Plan A wasn't working, so I've just took the decision just to rip everything out and just flatten the land as best as possible and repeat what we did over there. So I've got a load of membrane left in the shed, so I'm just going to membrane the whole lot, put the new beds in, space them out so we get exactly what we want, and then we'll order some more of that grey gravel and we'll just create new paths. We were going to try and save the old paths, but it was just turned out to be a nightmare. So this is a harder job, but it made more sense to do it this way.
Why you just all make it all one and just take this down there?
Because it's not
All connected.
well. I suppose we could do it a long way and cut it.
No, I'll just make it.
Yeah,
Then you'll only have. I'll come with this one.
looks like it.
Stop.
So come to this bit. Put that in tight, so
Put that in.
yeah. I should stand on it so I can pull it tight. That's it, right? Let it down flat, tight.
And just stand on it. I said, I thought we had a load more. Or is this it?
That's it. That's shallot. Roddy.
We haven't got any shallots in this year.
Give Grace a hand lifting them, Jack, will you please?
Right. Come to me, come to me. Right, let's make some beds.
End up putting 5 in.
Huh?
You'll end up putting 5 in.
Did we say 4 or 5?
4.
I know, Rodney, all the measurements are all wrong. Yes. Well, we've got them all out. They're not screwed together, which I'm going to do after dinner, but our measurements are all off for some reason. We're left with a big gap there. We should have been 60 centimetre gaps. I'm not sure if the the gaps are quite 60 centimetres, which they're not, but after dinner I'm going to come out, screw them all together, get them all square, and then we'll be able to move them all over like in one piece, and then we'll just get them spaced out as best we can. The idea was we were supposed to end up with a 60 centimetre path here, and for some reason we've ended up with a 2 metre path, so we're 1.4 metres off, but I'm sure we can claw that back in 3 paths. Just make what's that, 1.4 metres divided by 3, 45 centimetre path extra.
Spillage.
Well, by this point, Stephen is sampling my burnt flapjack, but said it was nice and it's all gone by now, so it must have been okay. But while Stephen was sat inside figuring out the new measurements, I asked him to help me out with the marmalade because I had done this over 2 days. So I don't think I mentioned earlier, on the Saturday, I brought the fruit to a boil, simmered it, and then just left it to cool, because by Saturday night, I was completely wiped out and had no energy left. And on Sunday, once I started adding the sugar, etc., the pot that I'd chosen was far too small, as always with jam making for me. So I said to Stephen, can you tip this into a bigger pot for me, and I'll crack on with that while you're sat at the kitchen table figuring out your measurements. So I went about potting up the marmalade, and it turns out either the measurements are wrong from the recipe that I used, or I've got them wrong. So we've had a double whammy this weekend, because when I got to the final jar, I looked what was left and realised there was at least double the amount that was left. So I had to go completely rebel and get out some unsterilised jars so that I could then fill them up, and they will be all right in the freezer or something like that. But I had no other way of putting them into sterilised jars at that point, and I couldn't be bothered with re-sterilising anymore. So never mind, double whammy, but it's still all worked out in the end.
Right, well, after a few stops and starts and a bit of re-evaluating it, we've come up with this design. So we've got 3 1.2 metre wide beds by 4.8 metres, and we've had to, well, we haven't had to, but we've chose to settle with a 4.8 by 2.4. It has gained us on the plan an extra 6.5 square metres of space, but it's just the way the paths, I don't know why we worked it out like that, but we were a path short anyway on our calculation. So rather have 2 skinny beds, we just chose for 1 big bed. So Tracy said, like in this one, we'll grow stuff where we just put it in the ground and you leave it till the end of the season and harvest the whole thing together, like squashes and things like that. So we've got them all lined up. They all look nice and lined up down to match the other ones. Nothing's anchored down yet, so we're just going to leave it. I mean, our weekends just aren't long enough. So we're just going to leave it like this for now. I might come in during the week and try and get them staked in and level up, because up the ground's not as level over there, so I need to put some more soil under the back ends of them. Maybe level and teeter them up a bit, but pretty much they're in the position that they're staying in. So that's phase 1 nearly complete. This is going to take longer than I thought. We should have just replaced the original beds.
And just like that, another weekend is over. We did plan on coming out here during the week and showing you what we got up to, but a combination of illness, bad weather, and some really sad news has put those plans on hold. We'll catch up with you next weekend when we tell you about the changes that have happened on the Smallholding.